All right, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to OneSoccer. I'm your host for today, Josh Deming, and I'm joined by my colleague, Alex Gangue-Ruzic. Should be a little bit more of a positive spin on the past couple streams compared to this one. What do you think, Alex? Hopefully you're doing well, and I have a bunch of notes. I'm excited to get into it, into our chat. Let me know how you're feeling today. On a scale of 1 to 10, do you feel a little bit more positive going into the knockouts? Are you still a little wary? Alex, what about you? How are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10 this morning?
Oh, I feel like it's a time of a lot because if you feel like results, feel like just black and white success. Canada got out of their group, but also they fought to get out of their group. I mean, it took a bit of battling, but they got out as a second place team in the group of life. So that maybe isn't the greatest, but hey, I guess what's great is if you have a short memory, you play the U.S. in a quarterfinal on Sunday. You have a chance to avenge the Nations League final. You get to play rivals in a competitive match. It's going to be a hard matchup, so you can look at it negatively or you can look at it positively as an opportunity. So there's a lot to process that, but ultimately Canada made it out, and I think they avoided the biggest disaster. And I think for that is good. That is good. We're not sitting here talking about a loss to Cuba or a draw to Cuba or anything of that like.
That is true. Now, yeah, disaster would have been in this group getting knocked out in group stage. I just don't think that's good enough. I would say Canada did the bare minimum to get out of this group, but I want to start. I have a bunch of notes, Alex, that we're going to go through today. And the very last thing on my note is apparently going to be the first thing that we're going to start with, and that is John Herdman's comments after the match. I have a couple different questions to ask you, but it cracked me up. John Herdman is just a handsome man, like he's sitting there, he's smiling, he's fired up for the U.S., and he went out and said that he wanted to play the U.S. The players, they want revenge. He's up for it. But he also said something very curious to me. He said that he didn't want his side at one point to score goals. Like it seemed like he was getting his side. He was keeping an eye on the other result, and he was wanting his team to basically play and fight for that second place. What did you make of those comments? And does it, if you're the U.S. and you're listening to John Herdman say that, would it kind of, throw back to those Croatia comments in any way, or am I overthinking that a little bit?
I mean, look, it's something where the bravado can only be judged in hindsight, and I mean, for Canada, I get why you'd want the U.S. It's your rivals, and it's a chance to avenge, the final where you didn't put your best performance, far from it, and a chance to win a trophy. Now, of course, you beat the U.S., you don't win a trophy, but you get a lot closer, and based on the draw, you're setting yourself up nicely for a good semifinal, and from there, if you can make a final, anything can happen. But it's still the U.S., right? You're poking kind of the top dog right now. The kings of Concacaf are definitely in the U.S., one would say. So it is a bit of a pointed shot at them. And I mean, I'd say that's fair for Canada. I think after the final, they have every reason to want to get another crack at the U.S., but also, they also have to remember that they battled their way through their group. They had 2 draws in the first game, and maybe that set up a situation where they could kind of control their destiny in the last game, saying, if they wanted to finish second. Of course, Guatemala kind of took it out of their hands in the end with them grabbing the lead in that game. But it is something where for Canada, they aren't in this position out of complete control, and I think that's something where it does look a little funny after 2 hard first 2 games that you're heading into a Cuba game with something like that.
I like the honesty from John Herdman, because I don't think it's not a surprise to anyone when you look at the path to the final. If we would have finished first, we would have had to take on Jamaica, who on paper you could argue is better than the U.S., and then Mexico. I like the transparency from Herdman. He said, no, I didn't want the guys to score. I wanted to set up the U.S. because, he didn't come out and say it, but I'm assuming the potential easier path, and also just taking on our rivals. That's the team that gets the Canadians out of bed, that gets our fan base out of bed. We want revenge on after just losing to them in Nations League final. I love it. I remember loving the comments he said against Croatia. It kind of backfired a little bit, but I do think this is different circumstances, Alex. But we're just going to go through the chat very quickly, guys. If you're joining us this morning, drop a like on the stream, say hello, give us your rating on yesterday's performance. I'm seeing a mixed bag here. We had a 9, a few 8s, a lot of 7s. And I would maybe lean a little bit more towards an 8 than a 7. I think 5's a little too harsh. They got the job done. And after hearing Herdman's comments, sometimes saying, hold up, don't score too much. We want that second place. I think changes it a little bit. But Alec, today on the stream, you and I are going to go pretty much player by player. I have a few talking points on each player I'm going to get. And we are going to first start with Dane St. Clair. So Milan Borjan picks up a knock, goes back to Europe. Dane St. Clair, we've been asking for him. We've been praying for him. He got the start. Probably not the perfect match for him. A lot of times he was pretty bored. And then, Osorio has that turnover. All of a sudden he gets called into action, draws a penalty. They score in the penalty. And then later in the match, another penalty, unfortunately, for Sator, who can't really get things fall his way so far early on in this Gold Cup tournament. But what did you make of St. Clair's performance? Is there much to judge with the two penalties, or was just kind of, an game?
I'd say it was fine. I think he didn't have much to do, and he didn't get much on the ball either, which is a bit unfortunate. But he showed his quality a bit with a few passes, which I'm like, I want to see more of that. But he had like a handful of them, so you can't really fully judge that either. And the first penalty, look, I mean, he was very aggressive, but the way I kind of see the way things shook out there is as soon as Jonathan Osorio made that turnover, it created a 3-on-2, right? Like a 3-on-2, 3-on-3. And I just think it's one of those where you turn over the ball in that area of the pitch and create a transition moment that lethal. Yes, with St. Clair, perhaps a bit rash to come off his line, especially if it was a set moment, absolutely. But it's something when there's a 3-on-2, everything kind of overcompensates, right? You're trying to fill the gaps. You're trying to be aggressive to shut down the moment before it gets bad. And it's one of those where Cuba executed it well. They made the right pass. They made the right decision, and they caught Canada out. And that's something where St. Clair just kind of got caught in that mindset you get in a transition moment where you see a turnover, right? And it's just panic stations on. And it was, just a destabilizing moment that kind of all started with Osorio getting caught with his back in the wrong position. And other than that, like, he didn't have much to do. Right? You almost feel for the guy that he's sitting there waiting. And, he gets a chance to show his aggression, his speed off the line, and he just gets completely caught out and having to face a penalty. And overall, other than that, not much to do in a game where Cuba wasn't threatening his goal all that much. So he was okay.
Yeah, I think he had 17 touches. So, we like his passing, but we didn't get to see it too much. The penalties, I'm not too harsh on. I don't think there's much to draw from this game for St. Clair. I think the next match will definitely be a better opportunity to test him. But now moving on to the back line, a couple storylines there. I want to start with McGrath. I thought personally this was his best performance so far for Canada. I thought he looked a lot more comfortable in a back four. I know towards the end we kind of switched back to that back three, but for the most part, job was done. What did you make of this performance from McGrath? And is it a positive spin on things, seeing that, hey, this is a guy who can do a job in a back four going forward if that's what Herdman's going to do?
Yeah, he looked better in a back four. I mean, I guess for Cuba, I don't know how much, Cuba played in it, just because they didn't really have the same speed that a Guatemala or Guadeloupe was able to offer in transition, right? The only real moments of transition they got was like off the Osorio moment where it's, a turnover deep in your final third and can it from there. So I think that also benefited McGrath, the kind of style of the matchup. But I think it was, a good confidence builder for him just to get a little on the ball a bit more, playing more of a natural position. And I think it's still something where if you're playing a speedier team, like if he was to play against the US, I think playing him on the outside of a back three could be a bit of a, it could backfire. But I think with the back four, he showed he's a little more comfortable, especially defensively. And from there on the ball, he had some decent moments. So overall, I'd say he was solid, but I guess I'd still be wary just, against teams with more speed based on what we've seen. But also I imagine, as we see with Portland, he'd probably drop a little deeper in those scenarios to avoid getting too aggressive.
Yeah, it's hard to take a bunch of conclusions from this match. And I do agree. I don't want to see him in a back three on the outside. I just don't think that's a recipe for success. But I just thought he looked more comfortable, looked more natural to him playing in this back four. I thought he at times used his body well. He used that big presence of his, and I was relatively happy with his game. The other player in the back line I want to take a look at is Ahmed. Now, I thought he had another excellent game. He's been, I think, our most consistent and probably best player throughout this tournament. It's incredible that you can take this kid and just shove him back to left back. When the starting 11 came out, I did not expect him to be the left back. I actually thought Bombito would have been the left back. That would have made more sense to me. And instead, it's Ahmed. He plays fantastic once again. What conclusions did you take from this match? A lot of people on Twitter didn't like that I said, not that they didn't like it, but I said like he's been playing great. I liked what he was providing from the left back position, very attacking, got into good areas, just so good on and off the ball. And he put in a good shift defensively. I just still like him more in the midfield. This is our most creative player, I think, so far. And I just think you're going to take a little bit away from him, restricting him in a back four or even as a wing back. Do you think there's a chance we will see him as that left back, left wing back in the next match against the US, or do you think he'll get shifted back in the midfield?
I'd like to see him back in the midfield. I think it's something where I think on the ball he was missed. I think off the ball and, the deep runs he can make helps a lot at left back, and, gives you a bit of someone who can cover that whole touch line. And, with no Sam Adekubi, there's kind of a lack of left-footed player that fills that role. And obviously Ali Ahmed isn't left-footed, but he's kind of comfortable just playing wherever, so you can, kind of stick him back there. So I'd say he was missed in the midfield, but it really depends on who you're putting in midfield. I just feel like he's kind of been Canada's best midfielder, right? I mean, we'll probably get to it. Like Hoylett been great going forward, but he's more of a 10, right? Jonathan Osorio, it feels like anytime he's dropped a bit deeper, he's kind of had some bad moments on the ball. Like that's why his turnover yesterday wasn't like a surprise. There's a few moments against Guatemala where he was uncharacteristically shaky on the ball, and Bombito's not a midfielder. Laturi looked good on the ball. We can get to that one, but will Herdman trust him to start in a game of the magnitude against the US? That could be a big ask. And yeah, so I think it's something where just purely out of the options there, you'd like to see Ahmed back higher up the pitch just to give Canada a little more oomph on the ball that they kind of lacked at times, it felt, in the final third.
And Boss Beast says that Ahmed is great in wide areas. He drifts a lot when he's in the middle. And that's the reason I think Alex and I probably want him a little bit more in the middle, is that he does have a little bit more freedom. You can see him drift out to the right. You can see him drift out to the left. He's got that freedom to combine. When he's playing as a left back or a left wing back, yes, he can obviously drift up into the middle, but he's got that responsibility in the back of his head that he's got to cover. He's got to put in a little bit more of a defensive shift, specifically on the left-hand side. So I thought he had a good game once again because he's just that type of player. He's having that type of tournament, but I want to see him with that freedom, and I want to find an option, and we'll get to it later in the stream of how we want to see this team, or might anticipate how we're going to see this team against the US. But it's very interesting to me too, Alex, because the next player we're going to go to is Bombito in the 6. But the two players for Canada that dropped out last second was Adekubi and Eustachio. Now, if those two players were in this squad, they're locks to start. That left back position would have been Adekubi's throughout the entirety of the tournament. And that 6 would have been Eustachios. Like, that would have drastically changed the way that this team played, added a ton of quality. Instead, we've seen Liam Miller play at wing back. We've had Hoylett drift out there. Ahmed now, not really an idea exactly who's going to start there for the US match. But the bigger issue for me was a 6. And this has been kind of the story of the tournament, I'd say. Bombito, very talented kid, excited for him to come into this side. Don't think that he's been used properly, and we've talked about this on each and every stream. And now he lasted 33 minutes. They put him in as a 6 against a team like Cuba. He got caught on the ball. His passing wasn't there, and he got subbed off in the 33rd minute from what I assume is just a tactical decision. I didn't see any reason why or any signs of injury. And he just, to me, and we've said this so many times, he doesn't look comfortable there. They started him as the outside right center back in a back 3 where I thought he looked comfortable. He looked like that's a role that he could play throughout this tournament. But Herdman went back, put him in the 6, didn't look good, and then they switched things up. Brought on Jaden Nelson, who we will get to, switched up kind of the midfield shape. It ended up being Frazier as the 6, Osorio beside him in the midfield. Hoylett went out to the right, Nelson went out to the left. What did you make of the rough start for Bombito? There's no way really that Herdman's going to put him back in the middle for the US, is there? Or do you think, and if he does start, where would you potentially see him going?
I mean, I think he was fine in the first 2 games in midfield. This third game, he struggled. I think really what the big difference was, he kind of was thrust in at the 6, and you could see the instincts because, 6 is a bit different in the three-man midfield. At times you can almost revert to your center back instincts on the ball, but you could tell in this game, just shifting him into a pivot was a big just mistake because, that's a big ask. Like, how many top midfielders in the world can't play in a pivot? We've seen it with Canada, right? There's so many guys who can play in a trio, but as soon as you put them in the pivot, it's a whole different list of responsibilities. You have to do so much defensively. You're going forward a lot. You could tell it was just way too much to ask for him. And, you add in that just he was having a nervous game on the ball, which was kind of, the one area he looked comfortable in the other games. It was just an overall, it just did not seem like the right idea. So, I mean, it was a bit harsh, I'd say, to bring him off after 33, but, credit to Herdman in the sense that he had the stones to bring off a young player like that, bring in Jaden Nelson, who really changed the game. So I definitely don't want to see Bombito in a pivot. And I think if they are going this 4-4-2, I'd like to see him slot back into that back line. I mean, we can go into some projected lineups, or if there's if they go back to that 3-5-2, yeah, see him on the outside that back three, especially if you're playing the US. If that one thing that they have, MLS team, A team, C team, the US always has good speed and wide areas. And while it won't be Weah and Pulisic this time around, we've seen, some of their wingers can be dangerous. And, if I don't know if they'll start a guy like Cade Cowell, for example, but if you're Canada and you see a Cade Cowell, I feel like Moise Bombito is probably one of your best pets to deal with threats like that. So I'd say shift him back.
All right, guys, if you're joining us so far, drop a like on the stream. Get your guys' thoughts in. I mean, I have a question here because I want to see what some of you guys are going to say. Where should Bombito start against the U.S. men's national team, if indeed you think he should start? So just throw it in. I'm gonna toss in just for fun. I'm gonna toss in left back. Let me know, or if you don't think he should start. Because Alex, I do agree. We'll get to the shape against the U.S. A two-man midfield terrifies me, especially with the next player I'm going to bring up here. I don't know. It makes my gut turn a little bit. I think that unless we just bunker and make it very, very difficult on the U.S., the two-man midfield is tricky. But let's move on to Liam Fraser. He's the other player who played against in the midfield against Cuba. I'm a little torn on Fraser. I've been pretty hard on him. I don't, like I've said many times, like the level that he's necessarily playing at. He's had a tough year. He wasn't even brought into this side, and all of a sudden he comes in and he's starting. I have a couple stats here, and on paper it looks like he had a really good match. He had 100 touches, the most, I believe, any player on the pitch. He had the most touches in that match with 100. He had a 93% pass accuracy. He had 5 of 6 accurate long balls. He had 3 shots. He looked comfortable. However, I noticed a few things. I noticed one, his pace is just not there. And I think in transition, if they go up the pitch and we lose it, fast players like the US would just run through that midfield. And I also thought he just looked a little slow on the ball. There's a couple times in this tournament where he's just not aware of his surroundings. He had the ball taken from him. I don't know if that's just in terms of the form he's on, the level, or what, but it's surprising to me that, he just kind of sits there and he just isn't aware that there's people around him and just loses the ball when he really shouldn't. I thought he grew into the match saying that, though, and I thought he had a pretty strong second half. But it's just the pace is a big concern for me, and the only way I could really see him utilize against the U.S. is if we bunker down and just kind of hit on the flanks. Again, we'll get into that and how we plan on setting up against the U.S. But what did you make of Fraser's game? Am I being a little bit too harsh, or did you like the way he played?
I'd say Fraser, he looked good on the ball, but I'd say he was a bit slow on the ball. I think it was things where for most of what he was doing, it was extra touch. And I think it was fine against Cuba because he kind of had that extra space. So I think that benefited him because against Guatemala, it was a bit more frenetic in midfield. It was a bit more hectic. And this game, he had more time and he thrived with it. But it is something worth noting, Fraser was taking those extra touches. I think it was noticeable when Laturi came on, right? He had that sequence where he immediately was playing one-touch passes and trying to get it forward. He did miss a few passes, but you're all of a sudden like, whoa, there was this jolt of energy. And I think that's where you kind of pick up that Fraser was slowing things down a bit more. But also, I think, to his credit, he could not get away with it because it's Cuba, but also, he is, naturally at heart. We've seen it from his TFC's Columbus days. He is someone that he likes to get on the ball and control games at his own tempo. It's something where a Cuba game like this allowed him to kind of do that. And I think he kind of got caught in that with Guatemala because it was such a frenetic game that it's like you're not controlling much of that tempo. The tempo had kind of been set by Guatemala, and he wasn't able to match that. But I think in this Cuba game, in a game where Canada got to set the tempo, Fraser was key, and he helped them in that regard. I think that's interesting worth noting, though, versus the U.S. Because it feels like, the U.S., let's be real, it feels like they're kind of going to be the antagonists. They're going to be the team that gets on the ball. They're at home. They're the favorites. I feel like it's something where could Fraser keep up to that? That's a question worth asking after what we've seen from him. But in this game where if Canada's setting the tempo, you do like what he brings in that regard. Just because again he can slow it down, but also he's good on the ball, and in a game like Cuba where they needed the ball, I think it helped. Yeah.
Now, because I do agree with everything you said, but I don't want to rip on Fraser because I thought his passing by far is the best attribute to the game, and Kilo here puts up a great point saying that passing sequence between Fraser, Miller, Osorio, it was beautiful, and it's just clever. Like Fraser is a very intelligent guy when he's on the ball and they put in quick decisions. And I like that little pass there. Miller had a great game, who we'll get to, and that was just a beautiful goal. So I do want to let Fraser know, not that he's watching this, but I do think that he did have a good game. But there's some question marks there, and I think Herdman's gonna have a big test to see how he will set up this side to utilize the players he have to be able to not get burned in that midfield, especially if we go with a 2-man midfield. But let's switch over quickly to a couple subs. And I thought Laturi finally got his first Canadian men's national team cap. I thought he looked very comfortable. He looked like a 6. He looked like a player who's playing as a 6. And it was good to see. Like, he came out confident. He came out, looked like he was just playing with a little, now in the short period of time, but it looked like he was playing with just a little style to his game. And I really liked that. But it was Jade Nelson. Let's be honest. I thought Jade Nelson was electric coming on. That pace, that ability to run with the ball, to create things. He got his goal. A couple question marks on the defensive side of the game. I noticed a couple times where he kind of lost the ball, or he just kind of didn't put in that defensive shift. And I think that's a testament to what Liam Miller did when he was put in the left wing back. I never saw Liam Miller give up on a ball. Every single time, because let's be honest, he's a winger, but every single time that he had a track back, he did. He put in a shift. He's just a workhorse. And I just had a couple question marks around Nelson on the defensive side of things, but there's no argument going forward that this kid could be a difference maker, can he?
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what you want from your attackers, right? That feels like what Canada was missing was Nelson, first touch off the game, ice cold, 34th minute. He goes and turns the guy. Like he's, and it worked. He was trying things, and you're kind of like, whoa. Felt like for the first, so much of the Guatemala game, even large parts of Guadeloupe, are kind of sitting there saying, where's that extra, bit of boost in that Canada attack? Where's that energy? Where's that willingness to take something on, to make that risky pass? It felt a lot safe. And then it just felt like Nelson immediately wasn't very safe. And that came obviously, like anything, it was a double-edged sword. Sometimes you go almost a bit too aggressive, but I think that was the right energy that Canada need in a game like Cuba, where you need the ball, you need someone to take those risks, play those dangerous passes. And yeah, it was interesting to see, because you can tell the confidence and skill he's got from his short time at Rosenborg, where he's been finding great form. And it'll be interesting to see if that he can translate that into a performance against the U.S., for example, like a start. Because again, against the U.S., it feels like you're going to have such little of the ball. Like, could Nelson be worth starting up front in a 2 with Cavallini, right? Just to have a guy who you can get on the ball and just be like, okay, go run and go be free. Because he did show great freedom in this game, even if, and that was playing deeper, right? So if you play maybe a bit higher up, he doesn't have those same defensive responsibilities, and he can, he can bring a bit of that chaos, that X factor that Canada was lacking, in the final third for a lot of this tournament.
And I think the X factor was a good word there, because in other tournaments when we have our A team, and even in the 2021 Gold Cup, you had someone who was not afraid to run I'm thinking of Buchanan, and it was just kind of a little flashback when Nelson came on the pitch and he just grabbed that ball and he just wanted to run. He wanted to cause problems, and I liked that energy. I liked the confidence, and he looked good. And I wouldn't be surprised maybe if Herdman, after that performance, thinks, maybe this is the type of speed in transition we're going to need, especially if we decide to bunker against the U.S. That's someone that I'd like to have. But we're going to quickly move over to the man of the match. I think that this was a long time coming. I believe 4 years now for the Canadian national team without scoring a goal. Liam Miller finally gets his first goal, and he does it playing in a brand new position. He's been featuring mainly as a left wing back at club level and now the national team level in this tournament. Alex, remember last stream we talked about having a speedy player that will be direct playing under Cavallini? We both assumed it was going to be Schaffelberg. It was Liam Miller. What did you make of this performance? Because the thing, like I said, I liked about Miller, I'm not crazy about him playing as a wing back, even though I really respect the defensive side of the game and the effort he did. but he's got that ability to just be direct and be quick and cause problems. And when I talk about everything that made him good at the wing back, being a workhorse, he was doing it as well going forward. He was always making runs, always trying to create space. He got his goal. He looked thrilled, and he was playing with confidence. I mean, I really liked the performance. I still see him as a winger, but one of the issues I saw with him in this tournament was his distribution. It just wasn't there. So this is a completely different position for him. Did you like it? And do you want to see it against the US?
Yeah, I think it offered that bit of partnership that Cavallini needed, certainly up front. Just that little bit of speed, a little bit of directness. So yeah, I think Miller, he looks more comfortable whenever you get him further forward. Again, I think his true position is still kind of like a left winger, where he can kind of cut inside and play a little outside, just because he has that speed, he has that willingness and desire to go run at defenders from there. But I think centrally, he brings a lot off the ball that I think you kind of saw, just because he's always running, he's always trying to get on and make things happen. So it's something where, in terms of striker options, if you're looking at guys who would pair with Cavallini, I think Miller would be a good one, just because if the US are going to play a bit of a higher line, you kind of want Miller's speed. I mean, if not, Jaden Nelson could also be a shout, depending on what you want in midfield behind. You could also, again, go back to Hoylett, but I agree that they looked better with the speed. So I'd say Miller is definitely there by in terms of one of the best combinations for Cavallini, it appears. And hopefully, yeah, like Scorpio says, hopefully he can show that against the US, because I just liked what he did off the ball really against Cuba.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up Hoylett, because that's the next section we're going to. That's the vets. We've been pretty harsh on them. We've talked about how, the performances weren't there. And if the performances weren't there with a young squad, learning experience, but the performances weren't there with the vets, and they weren't playing up to standard, except for probably Hoylett. I thought Osorio, besides the goal, I thought he put in a good shift, probably his best game as well, which is crazy to say. He did score a goal. He almost scored another one. He created chances. In my opinion, he was at fault for the first goal. But he had a better game. Hoylett looked way better from wide positions. I think it's night and day. Like I think maybe a couple of years ago, maybe when he had a little bit more pace, or like he played in the second striker role and he's done well. But when he moved him out wide, he just looked way more comfortable. He had a bigger impact on the game, and I thought he had one of his best performances as well. And Cavallini, I know he gets a lot of stick from Canadian fans, but I saw, again, another workhorse up front. You don't see a lot of the runs. You don't see a lot of the ugly side of the game, but he had a beautiful ball as well. Good assist. I thought he was getting back. I thought he's just a little bit more involved, because at times we know Cavallini can be a complete ghost. I thought all three had better games. Do you agree? Do you think that they all took a step up? Do you think that I'm maybe overhyping them a little bit? What were your thoughts on the three vets that I thought had a better match?
Yeah, I thought Cavallini, he was kind of just himself. I think, again, he's kind of one where I was less harsh on from the other games, because he kind of just was, again, as a striker, there's only so much you can control, and it felt like he was just kind of, not seeing as much of the ball as much as you'd like to see. But I think in this game he saw the ball a lot, and also he was kind of in the fight and doing Cavallini things without pushing too far. Obviously, he was on a yellow, and if he got another yellow, he'd miss a quarterfinal. So he voted a yellow there. That's always a win with Lucas Cavallini. So I'd say Cavallini was solid. He was kind of it was a lot of what we saw in the other two games, but he did step it up. I'd agree, but also did get more touches. Hoylett was just Hoylett. I think he's just someone where you get him on the ball, he'll destabilize defenders. If it's out wide, if it's centrally, you just need to get him on the ball, because he's so tricky and he's intricate. He likes to play passes inside. He likes to find those pockets and kind of has that drive, that X factor that we said a lot of players in Canada were lacking. And I think the difference is out wide, like you mentioned, he can come in from deep, and you add Miller stretching the field. It kind of opens up more pockets for Hoylett. I feel like Hoylett, he would almost pair better with the striker, or someone like a Miller or Schaffelberg himself, right? Someone who can open up space for Hoylett. It felt like Cavallini, you kind of almost get fooled at times because of his size. Cavallini likes to drop in. Cavallini likes to play with his feet. We've seen it at the Whitecaps. It felt like maybe him and Hoylett were occupying a lot of the same pockets together, whereas a guy like Miller, that's why he complemented Cavallini well, because he wasn't occupying the same pockets. He was running, he was stretching that back line. So I think it's something where if Cavallini's going to start up top, yeah, it makes sense to maybe shunt Hoylett over a bit wide, or have Hoylett underneath Miller and Cavallini as a 10, because that allows him to kind of get in more of those pockets and get on the ball. Because as you see, when Hoylett's on the ball, he has so much quality. I think he probably has the most quality of anyone in this Canada team, and when he's on, it's so fun to watch.
I agree, and that's the match started. For those who might not have caught it, the match started with Bombito and Fraser as the two midfielders, the two like central midfielders. Osorio was out on the right, Hoylett was out on the left, Miller and Cavallini was up front. Wasn't working. We didn't look overly good. Bombito went out, and you could probably pull that off against a team like Cuba. So Fraser basically was a 6. Osorio tucked in as the 8. Hoylett switched over to the right, where I thought he started to shine, and Nelson came on as the left with still Miller and Cavallini up front. That's just the big question mark I have against the U.S. And Alex, that's where our next topic is going to be, is how are we going to line up? What is the game plan going to be? Because it just terrifies me a little bit. Like, I don't think they looked overly good in the 3-5-2 in the first 2 matches. I thought they looked better in a 4-4-2, but it's hard to judge because of the opposition. We took on Cuba. That's why we were able to play an Osorio and a Fraser in a 2-man midfield in a 4-4-2. I'm not confident that is the solution, unless it's just 4-4-2, bunker down and just try to use the width. But I'm not even sure Osorio is best suited for that type of role. So where do we go from here? What did Herdman pick up from this system? Is there a lot to take from it to try to replicate to go against the US, or how do you expect him to line up against the US? 3-5-2 or 4-4-2?
I say there's good merit to both, because again, I think anytime you're playing the U.S. without a 3, at least in midfield, it's always a bit of a risk. But also, this is a knockout game. This is something where, not saying you play for the draw, but you can also muck things up a little and go for that counter. And the U.S. being at home, having scored so many goals, might want to play on the front foot. So a 4-4-2 could work. I just think you'd have to get the personnel spot on, right? I think you'd have to get players in the right positions. What's nice, I guess, with the 4-4-2 is if you line it up, you can also kind of almost make it a 3 in midfield in different ways, right? Like have one of the wide players tuck in, have one of the front 2 drop in. So there's options. So I'd say, based on familiarity, it seems the 4-4-2 suited these players, and give them a little more comfort than the 3-5-2 did. So if you could go in that regard. If not, I think there's also some players that you could look to and turn to in a 3-5-2 if need be. But, I think they'd have to be very, very specific. So we could kind of, I don't know. What would you say would be your pick? You'd probably go 4-4-2, I guess, based on what I know.
I don't know, man. I'm honestly torn. Like you said, if he does go 4-4-2, then the game plan has to be bunker. It's ugly. It's exactly what we did against Hamilton, or in Hamilton against the US. I'm talking like 30% of the ball. Get everyone to commit, to buy in. It's going to be long. It's going to be painful. It's a slow burn, but I think the proper thing to do. You give the US the ball and you try to make them create. The US just took our game plan and did it against us in the Nations League final. I just don't know in a 4-4-2, like I said, getting up the pitch like that, especially if it's Osorio and Fraser, I just think that we will get burned through that middle, and there's no way in my mind that Herdman's going to go toe-to-toe playing in a 4-4-2. I could see him maybe wanting to go toe-to-toe if they did a 3-5-2, but then again, big question marks are surrounding how does he get the pieces right to complement the side where you have Larea, and if it's Miller or Ahmed or whoever obviously involved, leaving space in behind there. Is it going to be Bombito? Are you going to stick with him for an entire match on the outside right? Is it Vittoria McGraw through the middle? There's a lot of question marks. I would probably go 4-4-2, but I would do it a little bit differently. Maybe we build it. Maybe we build it here. I'll bring it up, but I'm thinking like the way that I like what he tried to do in this 4-4-2 was having Osorio out wide, and then you can bring him in the middle with your Fraser Bombito. But I would maybe want Ahmed in there with Fraser, and then Osorio tucking in if need be, and then maybe Bombito at left back. I don't know, but let's maybe try to build it. But those are my big worries. The 4-4-2 can only be done if it's executed to perfection, and it's going to be a tough watch for Canadian fans. It's not going to be pretty football, but it's probably the game plan I'm expecting, and I think the only one I could really see Herdman doing to find some success. But I'm going to bring up my beautiful document here, and we're going to build a team, Alex, as we always do.
Let's see. I think there's a 4-4-2. I could jive with that. I think there's a few things I'd like to see within that 4-4-2. But yeah, I think.
Well, that's what we're here for. Chat, let us know. What formation do you want to see Herdman rock? Because like I said, I mean, like when I say Canada will get burned in the midfield if they play Osorio and Fraser, that's, there's different ways to set up. I'm more so talking like, if they try to take the game to the US with this system, with this team, there's going to be way too much space in the middle, and there's not the proper players there that have enough quality, I think, to be able to pull it off, which is why the only thing I can see them doing is bunkering down and then using speed, which they do have. So let's try to build it right now, Alex. I have the 3-5-2 set up because, that's apparently the identity that we're going. But do you think it's 4-4-2? Like, give me your percentage of what you think it's a 100% chance, 90% chance, 50-50? What do you think for the 4-4-2?
I feel like I'd lean 4-4-2 just because Herdman said they're the underdogs. That would suggest a bit more of a 4-4-2, play a little more pragmatic. Against the US, they started with the 3 and they didn't like what they saw, and they switched to a 4-4-2. We've seen them play. It feels like the 4-4-2 is kind of the default like safety formation against the US. Right? It's not okay. You don't want to go too toe to toe. Let's go back into a 4-4-2 and stabilize things. So I'd go with that. I mean, I like what Vince says, for example, about a 4-3-3. I'd like to see that maybe tried in this game. I mean, you don't want to be trying things in a game of this magnitude, but I'd agree that it does make it a bit weird to not have a 4-3-3 in their locker, because again, you just look like it would make so much sense. You have a back 4, you can put that 3 so you're not getting overrun, and then you can play guys like Miller in his more that natural left wing position. You can put Schaffelberg on the wing, you can get a little bit more. But since Canada really hasn't shown that, I'd say a 4-4-2 works. And what's nice is I'm sure off the ball it could turn into a bit of a 4-3-3, a bit of a 3-5-2, and gets you that flexibility. Because I think this game Canada's going to need to defend, and that will probably be best done for them based on their personnel, based on their familiarity. Their best defending will come in a 4-4-2, I think, based on what we've seen.
All right. Well, I got players somewhat in place, but they're in different positions. So let's try to go through it. So Borien is no longer a part of the squad for this tournament. Interesting they didn't call in a new keeper, but I do think it makes sense. Big shout out to Jonathan Sirois. He's been incredible, but I'd rather him probably play. I'm surprised maybe they didn't call in like Pantemis, like someone who's been with the national team before, but he's backing up right now, so might as well back up with the national team. But anyways,
Thomas Asal, same situation, right? Just one body to go fill the bench, and someone who's could maybe use a bit of that jolt in that training environment and get his Whitecap season back on track.
But nope, he went with none of them. So it's St. Clair between the sticks. All right, so I got right back here. So right back, I don't think it's much of a debate. I'm just going to move these guys over here. And I'm going to say it's Richie, and then CBG can be the backup. So Loraya, I did notice Loraya switched flanks a few times, which is, nice to see. Ahmed went over to right back. So I guess let's first talk about Ahmed. Do you want him in the midfield in a 4-4-2? Or do you want him?
I want him higher up. I think my back 4 is kind of already set.
So I don't think there's a way Vittoria doesn't start. What do you think?
I think Vittoria was rested for this U.S. game.
Yeah.
So I'd say Vittoria's in. I think the one tweak I'd want to see is we saw Kamal Miller playing centrally. I think that was fine for him on the ball. I think off the ball or defensively, that could be a lot to ask centrally against the U.S. Jesus Ferrera's in great form. There's a lot of threats. I'd like to see Kamal Miller back out at left back.
At left back?
He's a good 1v1 defender. He's played in that role before. I think for what the U.S. offers, if you're playing that back 4, a guy like Kamal Miller at left back could help Canada keep a little solidity and be ready for some of those wide threats they have 1v1. And then from there, you can maybe slot in a Bombito for a bit more of that athleticism. You could slot in McGrox. It's a back 4. He'd be a bit more comfortable. So I'd honestly be Kamal Miller at left back. Plus, it gives you that left you've kind of been lacking in possession at times to play a bit more. So bit different, yes, but I would go Kamal Miller at left back.
I don't mind it. I'm just caught up in when I build these teams. I like to try to get into Herdman's brain a little bit. I just don't think he's gonna do it.
But he's done it against the U.S. in a big game before. And they won, so we'll see if he goes back to an old tried and tested method.
Because it's funny, I had the same back 4, but would have slotted Bombito into left back and Miller into center back, just because I just think that's that back where I feel like that's what Herdman might do. And Bombito obviously plays at left back for the Rapids. He's played as wing back before. But I mean, after getting yanked off in the 33rd, I'm not entirely sure he's going to start. So, yeah, I mean, I don't mind it, especially with the strategy of sitting back and bunkering, and Miller's got that experience of playing left back before. He's comfortable on the outside left. Sometimes I know he even worries you there. So I do get your mindset. And even if it's not Bombito, you could slide Kennedy into that left center back, or McGraw. I'm still not crazy about Vittoria and McGraw on the pitch together.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if they're sitting deeper and not having to play so much on the front foot, that might benefit both of them. And could argue.
The best strategy for me is to, again, do what we did against the US and what the US did to us, is give the US the ball, hope that their only, opportunity is just to whip balls in, and then you have two defenders like McGraw and Vittoria who are good in the air that can clear it out. So, I can see that. Kennedy's also good in the air as well. So, yeah, like I get that. So whether it's Kennedy or Bombito, I mean, I'm gonna slide in Kennedy. I have to. I don't see Bombito starting. Maybe I'm wrong.
Kennedy looked good off the bench in his little cameo. So I'd be maybe a bit of a confidence builder, revenge game against the US for Kennedy
or McGraw. Like you said, either or, one of those two. I think Bombito is. Yeah, I don't know. We'll move on. But all right, that's our back four. The point is, Miller, defense-minded, lefty, out at left back, there to defend, and then have two center backs that are hopefully going to be good in the air that will sit back and know how to defend. It'll be Vittoria 100%, and then it will be McGraw or probably Kennedy. It could be Bombito. I don't know. I probably wouldn't start the kid after getting yanked off in the 33rd. He hasn't looked overly comfortable, and he hasn't really played in a back four center back role quite yet. But anyways, so all right, now we're on to the midfield. Is there... I doubt Lituri is going to start. Do you think there's a chance that we're going to get a magical wish, or is it going to be Fraser?
I would probably bet on Fraser, but I'd like to see what Lituri could bring. But
I would bet on Fraser as well. So, and then do you want Ahmed in the other midfield?
Oof.
And then I
don't know, because I feel like Ahmed we could see him in a wide midfielder role, right? Just a bit of speed, a bit of coverage, and kind of, because Osorio has more he has more experience, I'd say, in that middle of a two. Because it feels like it could be a big ask for Ahmed to slot in the two, and maybe a guy like Ahmed can just kind of be like, look, go on the right and kind of just play free, right? Like get forward, but get back and get in the shape, and then tuck in if Canada is struggling in the middle.
I was gonna say, would you see him more on the left because he just kind of played there as because you could, like you said, you could not really kind of shift this team because Kennedy would have to then overlap. But anyways, he just played on the which player would you want on the left? Would you want Hoylett or Ahmed to?
I think Ahmed would be a good kind of shield for Miller as well. So I think that's a good point.
And then you're saying Osorio in the middle with Fraser and Hoylett on the right?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably the Osorio Fraser is probably the likeliest thing we see from Herdman. I'd like to see Lituri, but who knows? Maybe Herdman was enamored with his 15-minute cameo and would consider it. But I think we're probably going to see Fraser for familiarity.
Yeah, Nelson could be a dangerous player to come off the bench. I would have liked to figure a way to get him on the pitch, but
maybe up front, I'd say. But I think you do want someone's speed, so I feel like it'd almost be, you'd almost be at the expense of a guy like Cavallini. Like start something completely wacky up front, like a Miller and Nelson, and bring Cavallini off the bench. I definitely don't think we'll see that. As fun as that would be.
The chances of that is right there. That's a zero. But I mean, who knows? I think he liked what he saw. And I liked what I saw between Miller and Cavallini. I think that there's something there. And that's the way I would kind of see it. 4-4-2, very defensive. I know that you guys are probably looking at that two midfielders there, and so am I, and are a little nervous. But I mean, if you play defensively, if you play in a low block, you give the U.S. the opportunity. And let's not forget, the U.S. didn't look overly good against Jamaica. They were lucky to get out of that result with a win. Jamaica had a missed penalty. They were the better team. And then they went on and basically had two throwaway matches against Trinidad and Tobago and St. Kitts and Nevis. Those were two teams they absolutely dominated. So they're kind of coming in on a cruise control, which now if you all of a sudden you ask them to create, this can be a very different side. I know Canada's not playing amazing right now, but this is a very different side than the last two oppositions, and they're going to be asked to create. They're going to have to find a way to do it. If they can't figure out a way to do it through the middle, which is, I would assume, is their best bet, play off of Ferreira, try to create something through that Frazier Osorio. But if we get to our execution, we make them play out wide and they're whipping in balls. This back four can do something defensively. You have two big bodies, again, McGraw or Vittoria Kennedy. You have even more defensive an anchor on the outs at the left back position. You have Richie who can kind of, take his chances and bomb up the pitch when he needs to. And then all of a sudden in the midfield, yes, Osorio, Frazier, not ideal, but I mean, Frazier is going to float above that back four. He's probably not going to step foot really in the opposition's half. And then you have Osorio who, will take his chances. Hoylett will take his chances again. He can cut in the midfield if Richie ever goes up. Ahmed, again, he can cut in. He can provide defensive coverage as well. And then you have Cavallini, who will be looking to hold up the ball, try to poach, do what he does. And then you'll have an engine in Liam Miller. And yes, I know that the midfielder is the biggest question mark, guys, but if this is done properly, you won't really notice it. You kind of get what I'm saying, Alex? Like, if it's done properly, yes, it's a two-man midfield that looks very bleak, but coverage can be provided there. And if they hopefully get the U.S. to just play through the width and try to whip in balls, I would be a little bit more worried, though, if they try to play through the middle, because I do think they have the quality there with Mihailovic. Ferreira can drop deep, and if they combine well, that could be an issue. I don't know how you would maybe counter that. Maybe push Ahmed in the middle a little bit. I don't know. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think the key to this formation, and I think what we've seen is we've seen the best of this formation. We've seen the very vicious bad of this formation. I think the best was Canada-US, Hamilton. Canada scored early, and as soon as they locked up shop and mucked it up, they made it really tough for the U.S. throughout 90 minutes and did well to kind of stifle a lot of what made the U.S. dangerous. But then on the flip side, we saw them run out a very similar formation against Morocco at the World Cup. And what killed Canada was that, Milan Borjan turns over a ball, 5 minutes in, Hakim Ziyech scores a worldie, and then you're having to chase, you're on the front foot, and you cannot do that in this formation. It opened Canada right up. Morocco made it 2-0. Canada were struggling. They had to kind of shift things around just to get back into the game. So I think the key is you're going to have to keep it ugly for 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes really to get this formation settled, stay on that back foot. You absolutely can't get in the front foot. And I think it's something where if you avoid any dumb mistakes, that's going to help you a lot, right? It's going to help you to keep things congested. But I think it's a formation that you can't really get too open with. So I think if you're playing a 4-4-2, you're kind of resigned to your fate. But that also might not be a bad thing for Canada, just to have to sit back, defend, get in the fight a little, and then play in the wide areas. Because I think what we've seen this tournament is, for whatever reason, Canada struggled to play on the front foot, even against Cuba, Guatemala, etc. It feels like without some of those top attacking players, they've been struggling to be the instigator, the team that wants to punch. It feels like this is a team that's wanted to sit back a little, but they've been the favorites in the group. They've been the team that needed to hold the ball and be the aggressors. In a game like this, they finally have a reason to play a little more to their selves, and in a must-win game, I think maybe that will be what they need to benefit them, and get back to finally looking a lot more like the Canada we know of, but we haven't really seen throughout this tournament.
So you just took my next question out of my mouth. Now I need to try to think of how I'm going to reword it, because that was my biggest concern with this approach. Is just like you said, we got entered into a group that we were expected to win, and we didn't. I mean, whatever. We got the better path, but we had more of the ball. We always had more of the ball, and we saw this team kind of develop into a certain way. And I want to know, Alex, is that the trickiest thing that we're going to see against the U.S.? This is a group of players that are relatively new to one another. Like, if we look at the potential starting 11 Alex and I just built, I mean, if it's Miller playing at left back, he doesn't do that so often. We don't usually see Miller, Kennedy, Vittoria on the pitch together. Frazier's coming back in the national team. Ahmed's brand new to the team. Miller playing at striker. Like, this is a lot of new players, and also a lot of new players in different positions. And these guys who are just starting to get used to one another are playing on the front foot. They're playing with possession. They're playing with the ball. And now, how difficult will it be for John Herdman to look at this group and be like, all right, guys, everything we just kind of did, we're going to basically do the exact opposite. We're going to give the ball to the U.S. I'm going to need, you guys to bunker down. I'm going to need you to be patient. I'm going to need you to wait for those opportunities to push forward, but got to be careful too, because if we lose it in transition, we're going to be punished the other way. How hard is it going to be for a new group of players to buy into a brand new system mid-tournament Am I overthinking it? Is it easier because a lot of these guys have done it? Like you can lean on your Kamal Millers and Vittorias and Hoylets and Azorios, or is that going to be the trickiest thing for this national team, is buying into a brand new system all of a sudden mid-tournament?
I'd say it's hard to call it a brand new system, especially again, like you got like what 9-10 out of these guys who are familiar. It's really just Ahmed who's kind of be the new face, and as you saw, you can kind of play him everywhere and expect consistency and buy-in. So I'd say it's less that, and I think it's something where, look, it's something where you're Canada, you're almost, the players have kind of dictated this themselves, right? If they were going in all 3 group games and they were dominant on the ball, playing in the final third, you can be like, okay, let's go, screw it, risk it against the U.S. toe to toe. You've looked great on the ball. Where it's just Canada is like, it's something where it's like, do you really want Canada to get into a track meet with the U.S., right? Like Canada was getting into track meets with Guatemala and looking like, they were getting the worst end of it. They were getting into track meets with Guadeloupe and got the worst end of it, in a 2-2 draw, it felt like. And even against Cuba, they were getting into track meet and they allowed 2 goals, right? Like it's something where it's like, you dictate, your performance is almost dictated as well. Like as much as you want to see Canada on the front foot, you want to see Canada grow and develop. For this one-off game against US, you also don't want to get embarrassed, right? You don't want to get into a 3-4-5-0 result, right? That would be terrible. That would be, especially, for those who've been following the team, it'd just be okay at the end of a rough tournament. Maybe Canada's depth isn't as good as we thought, or maybe Canada has some questions tactically. Especially a game against US, then neutrals are going to see this. The casuals are like, oh, Canada's playing US in a big game again. Like, okay, this is interesting. They see 3-4-5. No, they're not going to matter on that part. And I think it's something where if you're Canada, the tournament has dictated what you have to do at this point. And from what we've seen with Canada, there's just no. They've tried to kind of go toe-to-toe in the other 3 games, and they're struggling to do it against Guatemala. So it's like, why play into the U.S.'s hands if you don't need to muck it up? And, hey, maybe, in a semifinal against a Qatar or Panama, which the 2 teams they'd play, that's a different story. But for the U.S., too, in the U.S., there is no reason to play in their hands. And Canada kind of saw that in the Nations League final. They allowed an early goal, and they allowed it wide open for the U.S., and it was not fun for them throughout 90 minutes. And I'm sure Canada would have loved to avoid a repeat of that, just weeks after that first matchup.
Yeah, I was trying to get you. I was looking at the glass half full, and I was trying to, I like how calm you are in their approach. And I do agree. And I was saying, I mean, a lot of these players, in all honesty, have been a part of this national team, whether they've played significant minutes or not. They're there training. They know what Herdman wants to do, especially in this type of system. And the new guys, funny enough, have been some of the better players. Like Liam Miller going up as playing as a second striker, had one of his best matches for Canada. Ahmed, wherever he's playing, has looked great. I agree. It's the only way to play, especially with the issues that this national team has run into in this tournament. Is the only way to play is to sit back and use the pace, and you have the ability to do that. If Richie can take those opportunities correctly, and you have playing alongside Hoylett on that right hand side, that can be dangerous. The other 3 are just going to be asked to defend. The midfield is still a concern, and I truly believe if the U.S. are going to be successful, it's because they play with Mihailovic. They play with, if it's Roldan and he's in the middle, or if it's Ferreira dropping deep, it's combining well. It's looking for opportunities. It's not trading from the wide areas. And if they do that, a striker like Brendan Vasquez would make a lot more sense, because Ferreira is just not that type of striker. So it's going to be discipline. It's going to be long, and they're going to have to be patient. And I'm intrigued. I do believe it's going to be a very tight affair. I don't think that they're going to get blown out, knock on wood, but it's going to be whether John Herdman can do what he's done so many times in the past. Not really in 2023. It's not been his best year, but going into an opposition where they were underdogs, because for that first half of qualifying, it seemed like they were always underdogs, but Canada knew how to line up. They knew the opposition, they knew their weaknesses, and they knew exactly how to exploit that. So I'm intrigued. I'm definitely intrigued to see what they can do. But I want to go back quickly. Alex, I brought it up, but for anyone in the chat that didn't see it, I do want to go back to the Herdman statement right post game, because I saw a couple of people in the chat kind of ask about Herdman's comments, saying that he wanted the U.S. So Alex, just to kind of go back to that. So obviously there was the issue that he ran into in the World Cup where, he upset a lot of the Croatians. I didn't mind what Herdman said too much. But it just kind of seems like the personality that Herdman is. He seemed very happy, very excited. He tried to dictate the way that this thing was going to end so they could get second place, so they could go that route. And he wants to take on the United States. And I saw a couple of comments in the chat saying, why? I think the stat was Canada has not beat the US on US soil since 1957. Alex, what do you think the biggest reason is for Herdman to look past the fact that they haven't won since 1957 in the US, to look past the fact that, he peed off a lot of the Croatians? Now, if you're an American fan, you're listening to that, you're like, why would you want us? Why would you want us again? We just beat you in the Nations League. We beat you in the last Gold Cup in the group stage. And on top of that, he just came out and said, this is where we wanted to be. I try to dictate the players to, not score, to take it easy, to ride this out so we can finish in second place. What do you think the biggest reason is? Is it maybe the semifinal? He's trying to avoid Mexico, or is it the fact that Herdman's up for it? The boys are up for it. They want to look at the U.S. and they want to get the better of them finally.
Because it's a free chance to kind of erase the last few weeks. Because I think it's something where, after losing the final and this first 3 games of the group stage, it's put a lot of pressure on Canada. John Herdman, has been getting a lot of scrutiny, a lot of attention, a lot of questions about tactics and squad selection. And, it just feels like there's so much scrutiny, so much pressure, so much, all around, starting with that Nations League result. It feels like a game like this against the U.S. It's a very quick way to kind of leave that all behind. Because again, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a match against your rivals. It's a must-win knockout game. It's something where you win this, all of a sudden it feels, especially now, the expectation is so low that, weeks ago, you're heading to a Nations League final. Like, this is Canada's chance. They got the A team. This is their chance to win it, get that trophy. You look at the two now, it's like completely different. It's like, oh my goodness, it's the US, try not to get embarrassed, try just to keep it respectable, maybe get it to extra time, keep it tied. Like, it's something where if Canada goes out and wins, the narrative completely changes. All of a sudden it's okay, that's the old Canada again. They just won a knockout game against the US in the US. That is, on paper, absolutely massive. It is, again, a very big gamble, because you could easily, it's the US, they're the home team. They've pretty much made every, I'd have to check, but they've pretty much made almost every Gold Cup final ever. Like, I think the US, even Mexico's missed out on a few, but the US is always there in a Gold Cup final. So for them to be knocked out in the quarterfinals would be, that would be like, that would send shockwaves across Concacaf, especially in the US. So it is a big risk, but I could see why, in the sense that maybe it is a bit of a clear path for revenge, clear path to hit a reset button, clear path for some of his veterans to maybe avenge themselves from that final, because there's still a few guys that played in that final. Yeah, Boyan won't be there, Davies, David, Laren, etc. But Osorio started in that final. I want to say, Larea did, Kennedy did, Vittoria, Miller. That's 5 off the top of my head. I'm not. Osorio didn't start. Didn't he? Right? Yeah, I'm not tripping. Oh, no, not Osorio. Osorio did start. Hoylett didn't start, didn't he? I'm not tripping.
I think so.
In the final, either way, even if he started or not, that's still a good chunk of guys who get that chance for revenge against the U.S. So may as well, because against Jamaica, it feels like it's almost one where it's like they're the great team on paper. If they kind of win it, kind of you lose the. It doesn't have that same specter as Canada, US, your rival, a chance to revenge everything. So I see why Herdman will want it. But now the flip side of it is you're poking the Kings of CONCACAF, you're poking the Bears, and it could get really ugly. So now it's some of those where you're going to have to talk, you're going to have to back it up. And again, maybe for Herdman, this is as wild as it is. It goes back to Croatia. This is a chance to avenge Croatia. Or maybe you talked a bit too much and poked the Bears that are Croatia. Well, if you can talk and poke the Bears at the U.S., okay, it brings a bit of that bravado, brings a bit of that back. But again, it's a big risk. It's a gamble. That's why I say. And like any gamble, you can be swimming in cash, or you can end up with a bit of mud on your face.
I think it's just such a fun storyline. The fact that he did it once, and the media, I think, blew that out of proportion. Like I said, I don't look back on that and be like, Canada lost against Croatia because Herdman said this. I don't believe that whatsoever. We were just outclassed. They were a better team. We had issues throughout that team with the personnel, the players available. I mean, I don't think it helped, but I don't think it's the reason it killed us. And I just love the fact that he's doing it again. He's like, you know what? I'm backing the boys. We're up for this. We found a way to get, he realizes the team's not playing where they should be, but he did what he needed to against an opposition that, we're going to make Canada play with the ball. They got the result they did. They got the path they did. And he's not afraid to say it. Like, Herdman could have went up there and just like, we needed to win. We got through the group. We were excited. I like it. He's like, you know what? I wanted to dictate this match. So we finished second. So we get to take on the US. And so we got the better path. What do you want me to say? You want me to come up here and lie? I like the transparency. I like that the team's up for it. I just have big question marks on how the execution is going to look. But I like the way, once again, I liked every starting 11 we kind of created, Alex. We don't usually see it in the end. We really don't. But I like the game plan that we kind of are assuming Herdman's going to do and the personnel. To end this stream off, I'm going to ask you the biggest question mark you have around our projected starting 11, or even what you could potentially see. And I'm going to ask you what the biggest positive, maybe that one player or that one thing that you think could be the difference maker if Canada are going to do this. So let me know when you look. Let me know what you think first of what do you think our biggest issue is going to be, and then how do you think we're going to find success? What needs to go right for Canada?
The midfield. I think the midfield is the scary area. It's something where it could backfire very quickly, especially with the pivot. The pivot has to be super organized, super together, and that is going to be a huge ask. And I think something the U.S. could expose. And I think if they expose there, it could put a lot of pressure on the back line. And as we've seen, that hasn't done them a world of good as of late. So I think it absolutely have to be the midfield. On the positive side, I'd say I don't know. I look at that left side with Ali Ahmed. I can imagine him just going absolutely, just enjoying it, just running, getting up the field. Maybe we'll see who starts on that right for the U.S. Is it a guy like Brian Reynolds? Who likes to get a bit forward? Can Ahmed get a bit, get it involved in that matchup? Feels like, like we've seen over the last few years, Canada every year has had a breakout player. No doubt this year has been Ahmed so far through 3 games. But for a lot of these guys like Eustachio, Buchanan, even David back in 2019, a lot of them, they had a big moment in a big game like this. And I feel like if Ahmed could have a moment like this against the U.S., that would be huge. And I don't know. I feel something about I feel like he could have something up his sleeve based on what we've seen from him in the first 3 games.
Yeah, it's hard to look at the starting 11 and for me to pick another answer. So I'm going to pick the same answer, but I'm going to elaborate a little bit. Yeah, the midfield, it terrifies me. And I think if Canada are going to be successful, those 2 rows of 4 are going to have to be very compact and understand each other's movement. I think they're going to have to try to dictate the U.S. and try to get them to play it wide. Because if that's where the creation is going to happen and they don't start like a Brandon Vasquez, I find it's going to be very difficult and they're going to get very frustrated because we've seen that a lot in the past when we've got the advantage over the U.S. is they try route 1, and if it doesn't work, well, then they just default to whipping in balls, and they never really had the striker that could take advantage of that. And I mean, with 6 goals already, I know Frere's playing very well, but a lot of those, every one of those came in 2 hat tricks against opposition where it's kind of easy to play through the middle. So if they can make it difficult and figure out a way to provide coverage for your Fraser, for your Osorio, and they can push them out wide, I think that there's a job there where they can defend properly and then kind of fall back into what Canada is used to and where they can thrive, and that's the counter. And that's where the success is going to happen. It's timing, making sure that you take the right opportunity and you don't get caught in possession, because the biggest thing I'm scared for is when Richie decides to bomb up the pitch or Ali decides to bomb up the pitch and then they get stopped. And then all of a sudden it's coming right back down your throat, and it's Fraser and Osorio in the midfield that are looking to defend, and there's space all of a sudden, whether it's McGraw or Vittoria, that can be exploited. So that's my biggest concern is timing, taking those opportunities correctly and hoping to, if you don't score, then get a corner, get something or throw in where you can get back into your shape and get back to what you're used to doing. Because if it doesn't work in a sloppy pass, and Canada has been very sloppy this tournament, especially in that Guatemala match where the passes just weren't on. And if you lose possession there, this U.S. team will kill you. And that's exactly what I'm scared of. So I'm hoping just timing, using those players to their advantage, hopefully get a counter and score a goal, and then hopefully just defend for your lives. So I think that's the game plan. I'd be shocked if we see anything different with Canada. Anywhere over 35% of possession would be interesting to me. But that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is our stream. We will see you guys Monday morning. I mean, there's a couple videos that will come out from then, but we will see you guys Monday morning for the after stream when Canada take on the U.S. in the quarterfinals. So if you guys enjoyed this stream, as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, leave your predictions in the chat on the way out. I'm not going to jinx it, so I'm just going to put this scoreline. You could be for whoever, but I do think it's going to be a very tricky 1-0 kind of game for whatever team. But Alex, any final words before we go, besides the police sirens going on in the background?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want a prediction from me, but
you just say a scoreline. Just say a scoreline. We're not jinxing anything. What kind of game do you think we're going to see here?
I think I'll play my hand. I'll say 3-1. I think you can
3-1.
imagine who's
Wow.
who's going to be getting on the end of it 3-1. But
Okay.
that's just predictions, right? Predictions
Honest.
are. That's if you put $25 on the line, you want your $25 back. You got to
All
go
right.
safe. So that'd be my prediction. But we'll see. That's obviously not a game that would favor Canada. So we'll see. For Canada, you'd probably see penalties. You'd probably see 1-0, 2-1. So we'll see if they can pull that off.
All right. Yeah. I'm going with nothing. I think it's going to be very difficult to break down. I think it's going to be ugly if Canada take the counter, great. And if not, it's going to take a while, and then maybe the U.S. break them down. But we'll leave it there, guys. I appreciate you all tuning in on this Thursday, Wednesday morning. Drop a like on the way out, drop a sub, and we'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.